hybrid, bolting, hardening off. If you hear words like these and you think to yourself, what are they even talking about? Then you're not alone. As a new gardener, it's really easy to get lost in all the terminology that gardeners use. Today, I'm going to share 5 common gardening terms and explain them so you can understand what everyone's talking about. Stick around. This is In the Garden. Thanks for joining me. Whether you're a new viewer or returning subscriber, I'm glad you're here. This is In the Garden, where I share tips and tools to help new gardeners be successful in backyard vegetable gardening. As a new gardener, it's really easy to feel overwhelmed with all the words and terms that gardeners are using to explain things in the garden. So I'm going to explain 5 common gardening terms to kind of help you get started learning what these terms mean. Think of it kind of like gardening terminology for beginners. This is going to be the basics for someone who doesn't really understand anything about these weird terms that gardeners are using. Before I get started, make sure you hit the like button so I know you're enjoying the videos, and if you're new here, consider subscribing so you can get all my latest content. Now, let's get started. The first gardening term that I want to explain is NPK. What is NPK? What does NPK stand for? Those are 2 common questions from beginner gardeners. NPK refers to nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Those are the main nutrients found in commercially available fertilizers. If you go to purchase a fertilizer at your local store or online, you're going to see NPK numbers on the container. The first number is always going to be the N, the second number is going to be the P, and the third number is going to be the K. Those numbers are basically a ratio of each of those ingredients in that fertilizer. So the higher the number, the more of that nutrient is going to be in that fertilizer. So something that's like an all-purpose fertilizer, you're going to see that all 3 numbers are going to be close to the same, if not the same number, which means there's equal amounts of each of those in that fertilizer. If you see a higher number on one of those places, that means there's more of that nutrient in that fertilizer. Some plants need more nitrogen, some plants need more phosphorus, some plants need more potassium. So there's different fertilizers that meet each of those needs. But being aware of what the N, the P, and the K numbers mean and what they're for on the packages can help you understand. So when someone tells you that you need to find an NPK value of whatever to plant a certain kind of plant, you'll know what they're talking about. They're just referring to the values that are labeled on those containers. The nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium levels in that fertilizer. The next gardening term that I want to explain is bolting. What is bolting? Bolting is when a plant has reached the point of its life cycle that it's going to go to seed. You'll see the plant start to grow really fast and tall, and it'll stop producing the way it was during the rest of the growing season. So as an example, something like lettuce is going to grow really tall. You'll see it flower, and then those flowers will produce seeds. The plant won't continue growing leaves like it did through the rest of the season during this process. Bolting is basically the end of the life cycle of that plant. It happens when the temperature gets too high, when the plant knows that it's the end of the season that it should be growing in, and it goes to reseed itself to continue growing. It's its reproductive life cycle. Plants like lettuce, kale, carrots, cilantro, dill, they will bolt at the end of the season if they get too warm, if they're not kept within the parameters that they need to continue growing. Things like tomatoes, squash, and watermelon, those fruit-producing plants, those won't bolt because they already are producing seeds inside the fruit. You're going to only see this happen on plants that are not fruit-producing plants. Next, I want to explain hardening off. What is hardening off, and why should you harden off your plants? Hardening off is the process of getting your plant acclimated to the outdoor temperature, the sunlight, and the wind. Plants that are started inside or inside of a greenhouse, they're used to those comfortable conditions, and if you move them outside really quickly and put them in direct sun or in the harsh wind conditions, the plant is going to have a really hard time. It's going to get damaged, and it might even just die. Hardening off typically takes place over a week or 2, and it's the process of just slowly acclimating the plant to being outside, putting it outside for a little while, exposing it to a little bit of sunlight, a little bit of wind, a difference of temperature, and then bringing it back to where it was already at so that it doesn't get too much of that at once. And then gradually increasing that so that the plant can get used to those conditions without just being hit with it really fast. Hardening off is really important, and it'll help your plants be a lot stronger and grow a lot better once you put them in your garden. It may seem to a new gardener that that might be an unnecessary step, but it is actually really important. Your plants will do a lot better if you take the time to properly harden them off before putting them outside. If you grew your own plants, you're going to do that the same as if you had bought them from a store. If you bought them from a store where they maybe were already being kept outside, your hardening off process might be a little bit shorter because the plants have already been outside and exposed to some sun and wind and temperature changes. But either way, whether you've grown your own from seed in your house or you purchase plants from the local store, you're going to want to make sure you harden them off before you put them out into your garden. Next, let's talk about hybrid. What is hybrid? What's a hybrid plant? What are hybrid seeds? Hybrid just means that a plant has been cross-pollinated or crossbred with another plant of a similar variety to produce a certain result. Hybridization has been going on for a long time. It started mostly when farmers started mass producing to sell in supermarkets, because hybridization can allow for certain characteristics of a plant to be produced over and over again. Don't get the terms hybrid or hybridization confused with things like GMO or genetically modified. Hybridization occurs naturally in nature, but in the case of hybrid seeds, it's being done intentionally to create those specific characteristics in the plants. Hybridization can have things like disease resistance, cold hardiness, helping the plant to grow to a specific size, helping it to grow within a short season, to sprout earlier, to grow longer. There's a whole lot of things that are created by using hybridization as a technique. It's perfectly safe. It's not anything that you need to worry about growing a hybrid plant. The only thing that you need to be concerned about is if you plan to save the seeds. Hybrid seeds can't really be saved. You can save them and you can plant them and grow a new plant next year, but that plant is not going to be the same as the plants you planted the year before. Hybrid seeds, because they've been cross-pollinated, are not going to be true to what they were from the original plant. So just keep that in mind if you're growing hybrid plants in your garden, that you won't be able to save the seeds to grow them again next year. Next year, you'll need to go out and buy more seeds to plant again. The final gardening term that I want to explain is heirloom. What is heirloom? What are heirloom seeds? Heirloom refers to a plant that is true generation after generation. Unlike hybrid, where if you plant the seeds from a hybrid plant, it's not going to grow the same thing again next year. Heirloom seeds have not been cross-pollinated, so they're going to be true to the same plant year after year. If you save the seeds from an heirloom plant, you're going to be able to grow those again next year, and it'll be the same plant as long as they haven't been cross-pollinated. There's a few things to keep in mind about heirloom seeds. First, you're going to be able to save those seeds for next year and replant them, so that's a plus. Second, the fruits on an heirloom plant are going to be not so perfect and beautiful the way you're used to seeing fruit in the grocery store. The tomatoes that you see in the store where they're perfectly round and everyone looks exactly the same, they're the same size, the same color, the same shape, heirloom plants are not going to produce that kind of fruit. They're going to be different shapes, they're going to be different sizes, and they're going to be slightly different colors some of the time. But one of the things about heirloom plants is that the fruits typically taste better. They have a stronger flavor, they have more robust flavors, but you're going to lose some of the benefits of hybrid plants if you plant heirloom plants. Since hybrid plants have been cross-pollinated for characteristics like pest resistance or disease resistance, heirloom plants aren't going to have that. It's going to make them a little bit more difficult to grow, especially for a new gardener. If you have a hybrid plant, it's going to be like stronger, I would say, to certain things in your garden, where an heirloom plant is going to have some weaknesses because it's just naturally occurring and hasn't been crossbred with another plant to give those characteristics. So that's something to keep in mind when you're trying to decide whether you want hybrid or heirloom plants in your garden. As a beginner gardener, I would suggest you think about whether you want to plant hybrid or heirloom plants in your garden, or a variety of both. Heirloom plants are going to be harder to grow, you're going to face more challenges with them, but you're going to have better tasting fruit. As a new gardener, you might opt to go for hybrid plants where they're going to grow a little bit easier, have some of those better characteristics. They're going to be more like the supermarket food that you're used to seeing, but they're not going to have quite such a good flavor most of the time. So those were the 5 terms that I wanted to explain to you today, kind of discuss a little bit to help you get a little bit of an understanding of what people are talking about. Gardeners use all kinds of terminology, and it gets really easy to get confused or lost understanding what they're talking about while you're trying to learn. So I hope this video was helpful. I hope you learned something. If you enjoyed it, make sure you hit the like button, and if you want to get more content like this, make sure you subscribe so you can get all my latest videos. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.